Well, I would say to my Republican friends, and I do have some, take back your party. The Republican Party, the grand old party, is made tremendous contributions to our country, founded by Lincoln, but over the years, tremendous contribution to our country. Don't let your party be hijacked by a cult. Essentially, that is what is happening. And it isn't good for the country. We, of course, want the Democrats to be preeminent, but that's secondary to the fact that we need to have strong representation across the board in our country. And if what we're doing with our laws in the Congress to overturn what they're doing in the states, if we can pass them in the Senate, if we pass them in the House, if we can do that, it may not benefit Democrats. It may benefit more moderate Republicans, and that would be a good thing for our country.
But it seems that there's a lot of support for the position they're there amongst registered Republicans. All of the polling shows 75+% support for where they are. So in a way, you could say these Republican legislators are reflecting their voters. So it's very hard to take back, isn't it?
No, I with all due respect, I disagree. Across the country on issues, if you talk about gun violence protection by passing legislation for background checks, overwhelmingly in the 80s, Democrats, Republicans, independents, gun owners, hunters support the background check legislation. So they do not reflect the people. In issues that relate to, I talked about gun violence, but if you talk about climate change and the rest, very popular across the country. Not among some of the people in the hardcore of their party who are averse to science. They are they don't agree with science, and they don't, it's anti-science and anti-governance. If science says you should wear a mask and government says you can't come in the room without a mask, you can't go to school without a mask, that's a double whammy. Anti-science, anti-governance. And those two no's do not make a yes. And so that's a problem. Similarly, and really on the ongoing anti-science about the climate crisis. They have their agenda, they close to the fossil fuel industry, but nonetheless, not in denial over the science of the climate crisis. Of the climate crisis. So they reject any initiatives in terms of governance on the climate crisis. And that is a major problem because climate crisis is a health issue, clean air, clean water for our children, for all of us, but for our children. It's a jobs issue. New green technologies providing so much opportunity for new people into a workforce for new industries. Third, it is a security issue. If you, in fact, listen to our national security experts, they tell us this is a real challenge because we have competition for resources and habitat that is necessitated by migration and the rest. Rising sea levels, encroachment of deserts, drying of rivers, the thermal management of the planet, all of the issues that are weighing in on the climate crisis. But if you're in denial about that, you don't believe the science or the data, and therefore you don't want to respond to any regulations to make the difference, then that creates a problem.
Going on the congressional side very quickly and staying with this issue of climate that you've raised with us. Obviously, COP26. No, it's very frustrating, but we're doing what we have to do. COP26 obviously is such a big priority to get this particular agreement right. There have been a number of American presidents that have tried to push treaties, agreements on climate change. Congress has always stood in opposition. Seem to remember on the Kyoto Protocol, it might have been 98-0 in the Senate. So maybe I shouldn't say Congress as a whole. how optimistic or worried should we be about the role of Congress, House and Senate, in America being able to join with other countries in taking steps forward on the climate issue?
Well, let me just give you a slightly different perspective than you presented. With all due respect, the 99 was the vote that the Republican that they put up was, if it's going to lose massive amounts of American jobs, do you support following this line? It was posed in a way that there was no way anybody was going to. But now that was a long time ago. But for a long time, on the other side of the aisle, whether it was Montreal, Kyoto, just some of the agreements over time, Paris Accords and the rest, have rejected any research, any study, anything. We could never get the Republicans to vote with us on that. Actually, President Obama was the first president. I love the Bushes and George Bush for many reasons, but he was not a climate acceptor. He just wasn't. And his party was not. But we did work together with him to pass the biggest energy bill in the history of the United States. That we worked in a bipartisan way. He wanted nuclear. I wanted renewables, and we had a big celebration as he signed that legislation. So he did do that, but that was the energy piece, not the climate piece, and it's a dual piece. So he did that, but when he came to global meetings and the rest, G7, well, then it was G8, he never was a supporter of any climate initiative. President Obama went to Paris, the Paris Accords, et cetera, but we still had that fight after. But even when we had the majority, you have to have 60 votes in the Senate, so it's a challenge. Now we have a President Biden. He says, you don't have to talk to me about climate. I was the first member of Congress to introduce legislation on climate decades ago, and it is true. He was, and he has a right to keep saying it, and that's a good thing because it's a priority for him, because it's about health and jobs and security, and on top of it all, a moral responsibility we have to future generations to hand off this planet in the best possible way. And that's what he's determined to do. So I thank the Prime Minister for his leadership in making the COP26 a success. It's a source of pride to the host country, how it all turns out. And I know everyone is working very hard to make that a success. But as long as you require 60 votes in the Senate, it would be hard to get the fullest participation that is a reflection, really, of the American people. And by the way, young people know this very well. They are children almost in kindergarten, certainly in grade school, could teach our colleagues a great deal about the challenge that we face with the climate crisis. They are knowledgeable. It's their future. It's their planet. We owe them that responsibility. But I was so impressed when I was speaker the first time. Climate was my flagship issue. Climate issue. That was when President Bush was president, before President Obama. And we had a select committee, as we do now, on the climate crisis. And we traveled here to see what other countries were doing. And it was so impressive to come to the UK to see not only a difference between the parties, but intellectual resources of enthusiasm on both sides, if you call it the aisle here, in where our work was largely with the House of Commons. So it hasn't really been an issue of division in Europe or in the EU beyond UK for all these years, but it has been in the US.